So, as kind of mentioned, my name's Harry Dance. It is my real second name and not an alias. And yeah, I'm the Director of Digital Marketing at Kayo Digital. So we support growing companies in the Southeast through technology, and we hope to make a positive difference through technology, be that apps, software, websites, digital marketing, and data, as kind of why we're here today. So myself and my colleague today will be talking about two big areas, really. The first part is my area, and that is kind of what does a lecturer, teacher, anyone do before they even kind of work out the thing? It's Google it to try and work out what the definition is. I think that's where I start. How it's actually used in marketing and some real life examples, and then actually trying to create some takeaways. Not because tomorrow you'll be creating your own kind of big data analytics kind of like science experiment, or you'll be doing it yourself for companies, more to show that there is a process and to get you a better understanding. It touches upon questions there, but I'll be very honest, you can ask questions whenever you want, because right now I'm presenting to a screen where I can't see anyone, so if my internet's down I will continue talking, so it'd be nice to hear real life people. And the second part is Richard, where he will discuss really like the concerns over big data. And we're not here to say that it's good or bad. We're here just to highlight what can happen, what is available, what it is. So, yeah, what is it? I'm dyslexic, I've got a lisp, so this is the worst sentence you could probably give me, but extremely large data sets that may be analysed computationally to reveal patterns, trends and associations, especially relating to human behaviour and interactions. I'll be honest, that means nothing to me. And realistically, it probably means more to you guys, but from a bloke who's kind of sitting in his spare bedroom without a PhD and not working for a multi-billion-pound company, that doesn't relate to me. So what I did, I went back to Google and I actually went, God, marketing examples, big data, straight away. First thing I Googled. And then I came across this little gem. So Target, Tesco's basically in America. They've got club cards, they've got everything you would expect from something like that. Worked out that they're able to understand or predict when someone was pregnant by 25 different products they bought. And probably straight away you go to me, yeah, that makes sense, that's easy enough. Nappies, someone's probably pregnant if they got nappies, probably if they started buying baby clothes constantly. Yeah, but this goes deeper than that. It goes into what they were buying in the sense of stuff that you wouldn't expect, like ginger biscuits to stop morning sickness, to stuff they were no longer buying. And with this data, they were able to review their however many people on their club cards, and was able to work out, okay, so if somebody buys these 25 products over this period, there is a pregnancy prediction score of over 90%. Terrifying that you can even consider that. It went that step further, where they could work out they had 85% chance to knowing if it was a boy and a girl by their purchase behavior. By that I mean the baby, not the person who's buying it. And with this information, taking a step back, Target haven't been told she's pregnant. Target are working this out through the data available. They would send coupons and stuff like that saying, congratulations, have some free nappies from us. This went wrong because, by wrong, a niche definition here, but not as planned, because a father contacted, very angry, a very religious Christian family, saying Target was accusing their teenage daughter of being pregnant when she wasn't. She was pregnant. So this is what happened. She came out to him and said, I am pregnant. And already you kind of, through this, you can kind of see, actually, this is data used, albeit some of it quite common sense, of working out patterns to personalize to an individual, so much so that not even their loved one next to them, knew something before the data. And that probably is big data, is using large amounts of data to predict and understand you as a person, because we all think we're individual, and we are to an extent, but human beings, and I probably say this with a bit of jest and a bit of truth, we're stupid in our own right, because we all have uh, our not issues, our behaviour that kind of reflects little things like supermarkets, a trolley. Trolleys are bigger in supermarkets, those really big ones, because supermarkets know you'll spend more money with it, because nobody likes seeing an empty trolley. Because again, going back to the idea of stupid, and Richard will touch upon this later, and this was me bastardizing completely Jurassic Park, but should we be using it like we do, or we shouldn't? It's kind of up to you. And the next kind of part of my talk is to discuss about examples. Um, for big companies you've heard of, like the Netflixes, the Amazons, the Starbucks, to companies you won't have heard of, like the Parsons Knows, the smaller companies. So, um, moving on. And as I go into it, it does feel like a buzzword. Again, reflecting what I just said, big data sounds intimidating. It does. The nature of it is because it's you added the word scientist, or data can sound confusing anyway, but it can be so powerful and effective for companies. So Parsons Knows, one of my clients I'm particularly fond of, not because the owner's just really nice and he's lovely, but because actually small butchers, they did like £1 million turnover a couple of years ago, based in Chelsea Putney, and this year have started to go national with their delivery. For the more astute ones of you there, you'll kind of think to yourself, brilliant, so you do meat delivery, a small butcher based in London versus Tesco's, Waitrose, Lidl, Morrison's, all that. How are you going to compete? Well, keyword research. So keyword research, in layman's terms, or what I talk to my family about, is understanding how people use search, use Google, how many people search for it. So you can see search volume. This is how many people search for this term over a month. And then you define keyword difficulty by that. How difficult is it to appear on page one for that? Because realistically, if you're a company like Parsons Knows, you want to be on page one. Big data has helped them do that. They're not appearing page one for stuff like steak, fillet, because you're not beating Tesco's. But what you can do is search for stuff that they don't tailor for, so the more niche products. So what we did is we reviewed the big data and said, great, people are typing in goats. They're typing in, and I can only apologise for this, pig heads. Stuff like this that you won't see on the Tesco aisle. If you see a pig head on the Tesco aisle, please show it to me, because that's not a Tesco's I go to. And then also tailor for stuff that those supermarkets don't do. So recipes of specific areas. So goat meat lasagna had over 100 people search for it a month. We don't expect, you asked me today, and maybe in my ignorant view, I didn't know goat meat lasagna was a thing. But over 100 people searching for it, it's a thing, and nobody's writing about it. BBC Good Food isn't. So straight away, you use that big data to understand user behavior that isn't currently targeted, that you can put your own information in front of. What is a really powerful thing for a small company, because their sales of last year in comparison to this year have increased by over 40%. It's because they're talking to an audience that is not being tailored for at the moment. What you can see is an incredible thing. The second example is, and there's no name to this one, namely because I didn't have time to ask the company if I was able to talk about them, so I didn't want to put it, but estate agents, really competitive market, wanted to actually get in front of a new audience, but they're obviously Rightmove, Purple Bricks, all that stuff, but they wanted to use big data through Facebook. Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, let's be honest, it's known of taking data. Meta, I don't know if I call it, well, it's, yeah, I could call it Meta for a bit, but like they take the data. So much so that I remember initially when I started advertising, you could target people by their relationship status change. So if someone went to engaged and put it on Facebook, straight away companies would start automatically marketing to you wedding bits. Through this kind of targeting, we're able to use estate agents, the big data Facebook holds, to say we want people that live in, as an example, live in Kent, have X amount of revenue, household income coming in, have a child, and are interested in gardens, large gardens. With this data, Facebook can understand basically who these individuals are by what they engage with, because said individual, John Smith, is more likely to engage, if he's a rich man, with the Waitrose, the kind of the Jack Wills of the kind of the middle class, upper middle class culture, than Jackie Jane, as I made up a name both on top of my head, and I'm bad at that, it seems. Won't engage with those things. So straight away, using those demographics to take pictures of those individuals. Companies, and especially with this example, this isn't hard to do. This is very easy to do. Use big data to understand of how much, who I can target, how many people. So let's say there's 100,000 people in Kent under their kind of key defining demographic. So rich, got a child, like big gardens, like doing stuff up. And then they work out, they forecast how much it will cost you to convert each one. And by convert, I mean, if I spend £6.77, will I get a lead? Yes. So that's going to be every time I spend nearly £7, I'll get an inquiry. Again, this is big data that's available to the public. It's available to everyone, similar to Parsons Knows. So I kind of wanted to mix up now and go for the bigger companies. The reason being because I think actually you know these brands. So Netflix is a really interesting example. Less attainable what they do, but incredible what they do. They don't advertise really that much. Everyone knows the name Netflix. You don't really see adverts saying download Netflix. But what they do is they focus using their data, their big data, i.e. data plus 2, for user experience. And by that, what shows do they show people? What are people interested in? And this is scary how much they break this down. So they break it down into the user behavior of me, as an example. They will review saying, I only watch shows for about 20 minutes and I turn it off. They'll notice if I do rewind, I'll rewind stuff on comedy bits. And then I like shows, for example, with Will Ferrell. With this information, that's the sort of shows they tailor to show me. So that serendipity that we're kind of, that we feel like we're used to saying, oh, I just found an absolute gem that I doubt anyone else is going to find, is because that gem was given to you. You didn't find it, it was given to you. So much so that with this information, they show different adverts for different shows to different people. So using Will Ferrell again as an example, if I would watch tons of shows with Will Ferrell, and there was a new film coming out with Will Ferrell and also Samuel Jackson, and there's a few types of adverts for that, or trailers for that film, they would show me the trailer with Will Ferrell in and not Samuel Jackson in, because they know that's the person I engage with. Straight away creating a persona for you, and then understanding, actually, I know you do that, give me what I like, and promoting it to you. What is incredible but intimidating, to say the least. And there's also Amazon, and again, so this is focusing on the big data of pricing. So we've done on the keyword research, so what people are searching for. We've done on the actual demographics, finding people we want to kind of target. We've gone on the user experience, how people use it. So as you're already seeing through that marketing journey that you may or may not know, huge amount of touch points already, big data's kind of thing gone before you're on the site, while you're on the site, the individuals that you want on your site, and now the pricing point. So again, you may or may not know, but Amazon's prices change about 2.5 million times a day. That's not because stuff gets more expensive at that point, well, it does to you, but because there's either external pressures, similar to like the airways, where you kind of go, if you look at, they're famous for, if you look to buy a trip to the Bahamas, as an example, if you look at that ticket 4 or 5 times, that price is going to go up because they know you want it. Similar on Amazon, they've kind of got that thing where actually they change prices because of scarcity, because of demand, because of supply, and because they know you want it. And they also, that big data is utilized and used because 35% of their sales comes from the recommended products. So if you buy gin, you're probably going to need tonic. A simple way, not a simple way of doing it, a more common way of doing it in the world is a web designer creating a website and saying, yep, there's gin, we probably should put recommended products, tonic. And Richard will touch upon this later, I believe, like the AI aspect of big data, but they basically use data to understand what goes with what, and that is by purchasing actual kind of actions. That's a really poor sentence then, from people who have actually bought the product and that have the same kind of demographics, persona as you, it's the same search history, etc. within Amazon. What is, again, incredible to be able to look into that. But if you think that's 35% of their revenue, because a small web designer and stuff like that, you'd have to do it manually. But of course, you can't do that with Amazon. Think about how many products are on there. But that is pricing to first tailor it to the audience, tailor it for the company need, and by that I mean the Amazon need. If they need more revenue, that price is going to go up because they know it's important. And actually tailoring the outcome of the kind of interaction with Amazon, because they don't want you just to buy one thing. They want to buy 2 and 3, because 35% of their revenue comes from upselling. And then the final example is Starbucks. And so again, going down like the key areas of marketing, keywords before interaction, demographics, getting involved in the interaction, user experience, how they use it, pricing, and then loyalty to them coming back. So Starbucks, some of you or have been probably far too much in kind of Canterbury. There's competition enough. My favourite part was a couple of years ago. A small coffee company in Canterbury had a disloyalty card, instead of a loyalty card. Every time you took it in there, and it was a Starbucks card, if you'd gone to them instead of Starbucks, you'd get a tag, or I mean, you get a bit of a discount on your actual kind of your coffee. But Starbucks use that loyalty card to understand what people are buying, what people are engaging with, and with that, using that data to promote said things to other people that fit within your demographics or within your area. But this goes to a next level where they actually decide where they want to open their next store, and that's because of X amount of people have downloaded the Starbucks card in that area, live in this area. Then already you've kind of got a geography of Starbucks engaged individuals. That why wouldn't you open a store there, because you know there is the opportunity for a new kind of audience. So you're already tailoring your audience to people who are engaged with you. And jumping around slightly, this feels like a really big customer thing or big company thing. You can do this for small companies. We've got a client here where they've got a postcode checker. So you put your postcode in on the website. If they don't deliver to you, if they're not in your radius, they say, really sorry, you can't deliver. That piece of data, with enough of it, and when it becomes almost big data, for lack of a better word, and because I'm really pushing it here, becomes information to that company, because they can say, oh, 100,000 people in Gravesend want us to deliver to them. We don't do that. Should we open a store there? So it's pretty common practice, but with Starbucks, they take it that step further, because they define menus of what you see on your loyalty card, and they define your previous engagement. So they tailor the demographics to the interactions that they've seen and witnessed by people using the cards. similar to your Tesco's do, to all the people that have cards or something you log into. They'll be taking that information to create a personal thing about you, similar to Netflix, Amazon, all that kind of thing. So I think they were the kind of the key examples I want to give, because there was a real broad spectrum of this is big data, in the sense of you can do it for small companies, you can do it for bigger companies. Some of it is even free, to be honest. So just before I go on, and more so you can have a bit of a play yourself, and some of you may know this. So something Google, of course, this big data, but there are free tools like this, Google Trends, that really shows you people's search history, not search history, sorry, search demand, interest over time. So how many people search for Pokemon in the UK over 12 months? And you can see how it changes. That's when Pokemon Go came out. So straight away you can start seeing that kind of way that the world, or the UK, whoever way you want, is actually the kind of interest and how it's changing, the trends of it. That's the word I was looking for, and it's called Google Trends. Good. But yeah, so there are tons of tools out there for small companies, big companies. It's just that understanding that data is seen as more valuable as oil in some points now, because it allows companies to kind of personalize their message, but their product, to the people they're trying to target. And so before I leave and let Richard take away, I kind of wanted to break it down into 4 aspects. So realistically, like, there's 4 key areas here that we should kind of focus on. It's the strategy of big data, and this is, big data does allow you to strategize. It allows you to understand, for example, using Parsons' nose, what people are doing, how people are engaging with it, and to create something that hopefully you can market to your company, or to your individuals, sorry, that you're looking to target. And then with that, because that strategy, it gives you an understanding, because you then understand who those individuals are by creating the kind of personas, the demographics of how people engage, going back to target, knowing that the persona of someone who buys these 25 products is likely to be one that you want to put under pregnant, is huge, because then you can start doing the targeting. And then the targeting, of course, means tailoring the messaging, tailoring, well, yeah, your proposition to those individuals. And then finally, evolution. It's probably the key thing, to be honest. And the reason that is because nothing stays the same. Everything changes. The way people engage with the world change. Different countries do differently. Like, for example, Nando's, if you went to a Nando's in South Africa versus a Nando's in the UK, very different taste. Reason being is we have different tastes, that they're evolving, they're managing it. So big data can be a help to this. Again, you see me as like pushing it as going, yeah, this is really positive, or maybe you see me saying it's negative, but it's that kind of understanding of this, what happens with big data. And now I'll let Richard take over, if you want to show you. Oh, any questions before I move on? Sorry. Cool. I'll take that silence as a no. Perfect. I'll let Richard take over.
Thank you. Right, let's see if I can get this shared correctly. How's that?
Yeah, that's better than me. So yeah, cool.
Excellent. Good start. Good start. Right. Hello, everybody. My name is Richard Pilton. I am the CEO of Kayo Digital. I hope what you've heard so far is interesting. Hopefully you're learning things. You've now had a taster of what big data is and kind of what it's used for, certainly in the corporate world. Now, what I want to do is look a bit about what is arguably, or what I think is probably the primary, one of the primary concerns over big data. And once we've had a look at that, I'll then kind of move on to a technology that goes hand in hand with big data to make, which is what makes it so valuable. So anonymisation, this is one of the biggest concerns generally. It's a hot topic. There's always debates about whether data is appropriately anonymized, whether big data is really as harmless as it is presented as. See, anonymization is the process of obfuscating the identity of any individual while maintaining all or as much of the other valuable information in a given data set. Now, companies and organizations, they use anonymization in order to collect as much information as possible, and often specifically without legally being obliged to ask for permission. That was the reason why anonymization was introduced. They wanted to still collect as much information as possible without having to ask every individual they're collecting for permission. Now, over the recent years, rules have been coming to place to try and help the general public from data that's being collected from them. Probably the most well-known one a few years ago was introduced by the EU, which is called GDPR, which is data protection rules. This requires all companies, websites, organizations to ask for permission to record any personally identifiable information about an individual. So they either have to ask permission or have a very good reason to collect and store that information already. Additionally, in GDPR, any individual is allowed to ask an organization what information is being stored about them and ask them to forget it. Not all information can be forgotten, as there's a kind of a caveat to that, because if you purchased a product from a company, for example, the company legally has to keep details about this financial transaction for 7 years, so they can't actually forget who you are for at least 7 years from this point onwards. But if you gave someone permission to take your contact information for the purpose of marketing, you have a legal right to ask them to forget that and never contact you again. A more recent rule that came into place, which is about cookies. You are probably all very aware of, seen that cookie banners are on pretty much every website now. The cookie banners have been introduced as a new rule, which allows any visitor, any browser of a website to see what cookies are being used and what they're used for. Cookies are often used for, originally really for authentication and tracking a session so that a website can remember who you are, remember that you're logged in, really. But they expanded, especially with systems like Google Analytics, they expanded to start tracking what you do. Hotjar tracks where on the screen your mouse is. And basically, so all of this tracking information is put into large data centers, big data sets, in order to be analyzed at a future date. Now, in reality, on the topic of cookie banners, they haven't really worked, because the vast majority of people in reality go to a website and they click accept all to get the banner out of the way without reading anything that's on that banner. So we're probably going to see some changes, particularly with cookie banners, over the next few years. I think the leading suggestion at the moment is that we set our cookie preferences within the browser, and the browser imposes those on any website that you now browse to. But that hasn't come into place yet. Now, what makes anonymization risky? It's the risk of re-identification. And obviously, I mean, it says what it says on the tin. Re-identification is being able to take some data that is anonymized and then identifying the individuals that were involved in creating that data. Now, it shouldn't matter how much data is collected about general activity as long as it is anonymized. To give you an example of anonymized data, see, I am aware that there are millions of people every day that get on buses and trains. But from knowing that piece of information, I'm not able to get the names, the addresses, and the contact details of these people. This data is perfectly anonymized. It is available. I know there's millions of people doing it. I just don't know who they are. unless I had some other information, unless I knew them, unless I had other information to add to this, there should be no way that I can de-anonymize this. So to go back to, obviously we've mentioned Netflix already earlier on, but this is a fantastic example of de-anonymization or re-identification, let's say, of some Netflix users. So in 2006, Netflix publicized a $1 million prize for anyone who could come up with the best way of recommending to their customers what movies and television programs they should watch next. Now, in order to do this, they had to release some of its anonymized data for everyone and anyone to play with in order to come up with new ways, test new ways, and present new ways of recommending what individuals should watch next. And in this example, they released a data set containing 100 million movie ratings created by 500,000, so 500,000 of their subscribers over 6 years. So this was between 2000 and 2006. In this data, all customer identifying, personally identifying information had been removed. The only information that was passed on to anyone else were particular ratings that they'd given for films and the dates that they made those ratings and an anonymous identifier, so a number. There are no names, no email addresses, nothing. Now, so if you were a customer at the time, I was, you'd probably be fine with this. After all, it is anonymous. There's no way you could identify that I'm one of these people and what I did. So how did a very clever group of data scientists re-identify individuals from this anonymized, very brief, very non-detailed set of data that Netflix released? They cross-referenced it with publicly available information, specifically from IMDb. So a subset of these 500,000 Netflix subscribers also had registered, created a profile, and started rating films and TV programs on IMDb. They cross-referenced the data. They found that to a very good level of certainty that at least some of those, they could identify at least some of those people on Netflix as based on their rating and when they did the rating and all of the ratings that they had performed, they were able to match them up with profiles on IMDb. Now, you may think, what is the problem with this? Because now all you're saying is that Netflix still only gave anonymized data, and the only thing we added to it was publicly available data, information that those individuals were already happy to make available, their profiles and their actual ratings on IMDb. Well, the emerging information that came out from this analysis was the trends of what these people did, the specific, not the trends, the specific details of what these people did in their lives. They could identify the people that they had identified. They could work out that they watched television programs on Tuesday and Wednesday nights at these times. They worked out that on Fridays, they probably went out every Friday because they didn't watch any television programs or any films at all. You were able to infer more information about specific individuals that they hadn't given anyone the permission to have. Now, this isn't for silly things like, oh, we can send someone around to burgle their house because we think they're out. No, this is marketing. You've got to bear in mind that organizations were now able to identify age groups, demographics, geographical locations of people, what they liked watching, and when was best to advertise what types of products to these people. So the whole initiative of anonymizing this data and asking permissions failed as soon as you added publicly available information to it. So this is one of the inherent risks of big data. How did they do it? I mean, you can always, the series of data scientists, you could always obviously take all of the information, do some analysis yourself and try and work out some trends and see if you can identify people. But with millions of reviews, across 2 separate platforms, IMDb and Netflix, with hundreds of thousands of users. This is going to take people, individual people, years to do. So welcome. Artificial intelligence is the best friend of big data. You've probably all heard of artificial intelligence. It is always a hot topic. It will be for the foreseeable decades. So a bit of introduction. I'm going to heavily oversimplify AI. There's 2 main groups of AI. We've got artificial general intelligence and we've got artificial narrow or weak intelligence. Starting with artificial general intelligence, this is the hypothetical ability of an intelligence or an intelligent agent to understand and or learn any intellectual task that a human being can. So something that is capable of acquiring new skills, acquiring new information, making decisions entirely about what it's going to do on its own. The best, by far, examples of this are in fiction, in films you've probably heard of, like Terminator or The Matrix, where an artificial general intelligence becomes so clever, it becomes self-aware. They love the term self-aware. It becomes self-aware, identifies that human beings are its biggest risk to its continuing existence, and then decides to wage a global war against humanity to eradicate it in order to ensure that it sustains itself. Thankfully, that is fiction. This isn't artificial general intelligence, for now at least, is of no risk to humanity. Large proportion of scientists don't believe that artificial general intelligence is even possible. Certainly not before we can fully understand and map the human brain. So that leaves artificial narrow or weak intelligence. Weak intelligence it's an AI that is focused on one or a set of narrow tasks, which makes it sound pretty dumb compared to artificial general intelligence. And an example, a good example of this kind of intelligence is Google Home or Alexa. You've probably all used one of them. You speak to a device, it listens to what you're saying, it interprets what you've said, it answers your questions, or it performs basic tasks which you've commanded it to do. These tasks, I mean, the questions, the AI itself doesn't actually know the answer to the questions. The AI refers any questions to a search engine, not dissimilar to Google itself, obviously, to get the answers or suggest some articles which may have your answer. The tasks that it can perform is actually extremely limited. You can only really do one thing, which is ask something else that can do it to do said task. And it usually is it's something that you already have another interface to do with it. So you could, like a remote control or a phone or a switch. So Google Home and Alexa, they obviously seem quite basic compared to general intelligence. But this can escalate, and it escalates very quickly in terms of how powerful even such a narrow target of AI, what it can really create in the real world, or the effect it can have on the real world. The best example I think of is human consumer habits, the predictability of consumer habits. Let's take Google's AI, Google Shopping AI. It is able to gather data, information about trends and habits across a wide array of channels. And you can use them to predict the best way to promote goods and services to consumers, with the hope that it maximizes the chance of them purchasing. The channels that it has available to it are Google search engine itself. It knows your search activity. Obviously, Google Analytics. Pretty much every website on the planet now has Google Analytics on it. So they know your search habits, and now they know your browsing habits. Google owns YouTube. They also know your viewing habits, the things you subscribe to. Android phones, obviously. So now they have information based on your geographical locations, what you watch, what you download, what you play, when you sleep. I mean, I'm sure there's probably quite a few people here who has think of it yourselves. Have you had a conversation about any product or service, and then you've had a conversation about a product or service with someone else? You've been in a room, you've had a conversation about, say, a Dyson Hoover, and then you've been advertised that product. Now, you didn't search for that product on Google. You hadn't, as far as you're aware, you didn't search for that product on Google. You certainly didn't go to the Dyson website. So you think the only possible way that this has happened is that your phone is listening to you. Now, I'll put you, there have been objective studies, so I wouldn't worry too much. And those objective studies have concluded that phones are not listening to you. It doesn't mean they won't, but phones are not listening to you. The interesting thing here is that humans are surprisingly predictable. And we're not as unique as we think. Not only the information of your activities does Google have at its exposure, it also has news availability, geographical events that are happening, content that is being created, fashion trends, viewing trends, everything. There is so much information that even though correlation is not causation, it does find correlation in things, and it doesn't need to know why there is a correlation. There may have been certain things that have happened and news articles that have appeared, and that has increased a spike for reasons that it doesn't need to understand in people talking about Dyson Hoovers, and there's been a spike in a desire to buy them. So it shows millions of people adverts on Dyson's Hoovers. Most of those people don't understand why they've been advertised a Dyson Hoover, and they just ignore it. But the people who recently spoke about it think, why, how did it know? Why have I been, you must have been listening to me. How did you know that I was talking about Dyson Hoovers? And it's not that simple, it's the other way around. It wasn't that it heard you. There was activities around the entire world that resulted in a spike in desire for Dyson Hoovers. We live in a world where people no longer walk door to door trying to sell vacuum cleaners. We no longer find cold callers acceptable. We do not like people calling our phones, asking us if we want to change our utility provider or to buy a new insurance policy. This is no longer acceptable to us. And the vast majority of companies understand this. And instead of reaching out to customers in order to try and push sell their product and services, they understand that they must be where those consumers are looking when they want it. And that is what emerges from understanding consumer habits across multiple platforms. Consumer habits, current trends, hot topics, they all come into play. Now, why is artificial intelligence a concern? When an AI is set to do a simple, when an AI is set to do a simple task, to do something, it lacks these permanent caveats. No, let me start that again. Privacy, artificial intelligence is a concern for privacy, as we've shown with the previous Netflix example. But human judgment is arguably, and what I would say is, it's a much bigger issue, but it's much more subtle as well, and that's what makes it dangerous. If a human is asked to do something, and we accept, yes, we are going to do, I've been asked to do something, and we accept to do it. We have these rules. If the person or someone else comes into mortal danger, if the task suddenly becomes in conflict with some ethical or moral structure, we decide not to do the task anymore. Now, when an AI is set to do a simple task, it lacks these caveats. Now, in order to give a good example of this, one of the most successful activities that AI is involved in is the management of content on social media platforms and YouTube and things like that. And the reason why I say management of it is because AI and these companies, they do not create the content. So the topic of the content, what videos or pictures are about, the AI doesn't need to understand what it is. I mean, to be perfectly honest, an AI is also unable to understand what anything's about, certainly unable to discern truth, whether or not the content that has been created and now made public is actually truthful. And this leads to propagation of misinformation and a relatively new term, fake news. Now, an AI is targeted to maximize the engagement of people for as long as possible, and to get as many people to engage for as long as possible. So really what it does, it constantly in real time runs millions and millions of start points, assessing that when someone looks at this video, of which it doesn't know what it's about, it tries 3 other videos, tries to recommend 3 other videos, quickly identifies out of A, B, and C that B is the best one, and then promotes that more above the other 2. And it will iteratively do this millions and millions and millions of times a day until it converges to the best string of content for individuals to maximize the length of time they're engaged on a platform. And this is where strange things start to emerge. As I say, AI is not aware of the content of these. It's not easily able to identify the content or the truthfulness of this information, this content that has been created. AI is not trying to make us to believe in things like flat Earth or conspiracy theories. It's just trying to get you to engage for as long and as often as possible. And the longer you engage with a platform, and the more of you that do that, increases the value of those platforms from a marketing perspective. It leads to unintended political influence, and it can even affect the democratic process. You know, there are many articles about whether or not how Brexit was affected, how the most recent general election in America and the United States was affected. I don't know. I'm not going to comment on either of those. The thing is that it is shining, what AI is doing is showing us all a mirror and saying that you're more interested in consuming bad information than good information. Some people interpret this as technology companies and big data and AI trying to purposefully propagate misinformation, but really, it's just showing us what we like to consume, and the failure is actually with us. Traditionally, media outlets, news outlets and things like this, they've known this and they've prospered from it. Not all of them, some of them. It's just unfortunate that AI inadvertently puts this into overdrive. It's going at absolute warp speed. If there's anything that I would say, the best and arguably the only way you should rely on protecting yourself from things like this, and you can protect yourself, it's not all doom and gloom, it is not over. But the best way to protect yourself as an individual from this is to exercise good skepticism, critical thinking, learn how to consume information, strive to get to know as many true things as possible and as little false things as possible at the same time. If any of you are interested in learning a little bit more about what AI does for social media platforms, because I know we're limited to time here, it's not the best thing you can do, but it's quite a good start. You might want to check out, there is an interesting film on Netflix, which is quite thought-provoking. You may have already watched it already, called The Social Dilemma. It gives an interesting insight into it. So I think that's about all the time we have now. So thank you very much for listening to me and Harry. And I suppose I'll ask once again to see if there's any questions. I reckon I can predict if there are.
If no question from students, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So in the second part, Richard talked about quite a number of areas about the data privacy concern, and also the challenge of applying AI. Can I ask, so I have noticed that there is a trend in the research area is about explainable AI, which try to open up the black box of AI models, trying to improve the fairness, transparency, accountability of AI models. Do you see this trend happening in the real world in practice?
Personally, not so much yet, but you know, It's a bit like chaos theory. You know, the reason why GDPR and cookies came about, because once you'd identified the issue, they needed to start putting. Unfortunately, regulation and authorities are always behind the wave. So AI is actually quite difficult to understand its capabilities. So I know there is lots of research doing on how we can get it more fair and how we can make it less biased and less discriminatory and things like that. There are initiatives to do that, but there's no pressure yet to do it. Or if there are, it's not enough pressure. Now, as I said, you know, it's not all doom and gloom. It's just that AI is doing exactly what it was asked to do, which was just to get people to, in my example, watch more videos. It is. You know, it's not just a technology solution to solve this. There is probably also a wider social way of solving this, which is, what things do we like consuming? How do we don't seem to get taught very well how to think critically and consume information and understand that this is not backed by evidence and things like that. So there are things that we can do ourselves while regulation is catching up. Regulation and technology is catching up.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Yeah, can I ask a question to Harry, please? It's kind of asking the question for our students, because our students, we have some students, their background is in marketing from bachelor study. And for the majority of students, they don't have a degree in marketing. And for this a postgraduate degree, they are kind of learning digital marketing first time. So as a digital marketing director, do you have any advice to our students what aspects they could focus on to try to improve, that after this year of study they could help them to improve their employability?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. It's digital marketing, like any technology area, is unique because it's changing so quickly. So it's one of those things where sometimes with the employability part, with myself when I'm recruiting someone, yes, I'm impressed that you have a CV that has X experience in, but you know stuff changes so quickly. So it's to sit on the fence. It's sometimes just make sure you're highlighting what things are changing and understanding, and that you want to change and develop it. But actually, on the employability point, it is a yeah. Be aware that. Oh, it's a really hard question. God, why did you do this to me? It's one of those things that it's sometimes about the personality. It's such a young industry. It is do stuff outside of work if you want, learn bits and bobs like SEO itself. So if you wanted to get an SEO, and by SEO I mean search engine optimization, i.e. how do I appear in Google? Build your own website. You can do it really easily. And look at stuff like Moz, search engine tables, stuff like that, because realistically you hear people who are experts in SEO, as an example, who haven't changed their opinions in 5 years, and because of that they're actually out of date now because Google's changed. Like Google has done 24 updates this year. Well, I mean, some of the stuff I may say to people is probably wrong, so I have to kind of keep refreshing. So it's that understanding of, if you're looking to get in the industry, it's have a good CV, have experience, but it's also that and it's the thing when you try and get a job in the pub, isn't it, really? They go, have you got experience? You go, no, that's why I want a job in a pub, to get experience. But with digital marketing, you can get your own experience. You don't need a company. So it is that kind of put yourself out there. There's tons of places that need support. And just also, if in the employability side, approach an agency. They don't have to say we're looking for jobs. Quite a lot of agencies run out of colleagues very quickly, and will happily talk to people if they need support. So yeah. Was that on the fence enough?
Actually, I'd like to just add to that as well. Just in terms of employability of stuff, I think not enough people are told that being an employer myself, we are finding that We want people to genuinely have an interest in what they do and to demonstrate that. This doesn't, that is sometimes as if not more important than experience, to demonstrate that I like it, I'm interested in it. So this is why Harry said making a website. Approaching agencies is also an extremely good idea, because being an employer, it is actually very expensive for us to go to employment agencies to employ people. So often you'll find that approaching agencies to say, I'm at this level, I've got a massive interest in this subject, and is there any job availabilities? It is actually better for companies prefer to employ people directly than rather going through agencies, because it can save them it can save them thousands of pounds in one go and reduce the risk. So I think it's worthwhile just telling everyone that it's gone. The days are not gone where you actually approach a company and say, "Do you have any jobs?"
Yeah, that's a big one. Albeit we're videoing here, so there'd be evidence of this. When I was looking for jobs before I was at Kayo Digital, recruiters would approach me and go, "Do you want a job here?" And I'd say no, and then I'd approach the job, because I knew I knew if the recruiter did it, that the company would have to pay recruitment fees. They'd be less interested in it, because they can be as up to like 10% of your salary for the year, so it's a lot of money. And the company just wants someone who knows them. So yeah, yeah.
Thank you. We have a question coming up from the chat from Deepesh. A question for Harry. So for the example, I don't know whether you can read the chat for Parsons Notes. The question is, why did you use the long tail keywords in solution part?
Oh, cool. Yeah, I didn't cover that. So as a quick description of what long tail means, it just basically means more specific to what you would expect. So if I was buying socks, a long tail version would be red socks. You could type in socks, or you could get more specific. And long tail is a lot less competitive normally, but you've got better chance of them buying or engaging with you. So red socks without elastic without elastic would be a lot more niche. So what we did with that kind of thing is then, actually, I don't want to peer for fillet steak because we can't. It's too competitive. It's too big a term. Yes, 100,000 people search for it a month, but no, we're not going to compete. So we went for the long tail version. So that would be like fillet steak from a farm in Surrey, as an example. A lot less people are searching for it. It's a lot less competitive, and actually you can get better return on investment from it. Going back to that idea of socks, some people don't want to just see lots of socks. They want to see red socks. Target red socks. Less search volume, but people more likely to buy. So yeah, that's probably the answer. And I can't see the chat. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Eric.
That's right. Cool.
We have another question coming up in the chat. So the question is, what technical skills do you recommend us to learn along with conversational digital marketing skills, such as UI, UX, web development, data analytics, and yes?
Oh, I'm going to sit on the fence again. No, it's funny because digital marketing is so broad. Like, it is like the same as saying, going to a marketing person and just say, can you design something? And they say, no, I do the writing part. You're like, oh, okay, cool. So you're a writer, you don't do the drawing part. It's the same with digital marketing, and there's so many segments. Something I think personally isn't taught enough in digital marketing is what I see a lot of value in, is because it's a new industry and because you can do it on a computer at home, realistically, like anyone can do it, is the strategy and the understanding. So I'm posting on social media. Why are you doing that? I think that's the biggest thing of going, is there a strategy around it? And a good one, I don't know if you teach this at uni or anything like that. Basically, something called SOSTAC is one of the biggest things I use as strategy. SOSTAC strategy. It's basically, you break down a process and say, what's the situation we're in? What are the opportunities? What's the strategy, tactics, action, and how are we going to control this so it doesn't go all out of kill? because you can learn coding, you can learn UI, AI, all this stuff. You have to have not experience, but I learned by doing. But the big thing for me is always understanding why, like why are you doing this, and then being able to understand that, and then you can develop a lot quicker, I feel, because we all work with people who very gifted at X, but won't be able to look out the side of their box, and it's quite difficult to work with them, because you say, do we need social media? And if they do only social media, they go, yeah, of course we do. You're like, why? And they go, because I do social media. And you're like, cool. But it's probably depends what area you want to go into, but that bigger picture I think is really beneficial for people.